Welcome to Two Millennials and Mom, where we bring you engaging conversations and respectful disagreement across the social spectrum.
Injected with the quirks of everyday life.
Curl up as we navigate the complexities of this modern world with all the humor and warmth we can muster.
And the occasional gentle ribbing. We're glad you're here. Happy listening.
Everywhere you turn, somebody's talking about DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's become such a hot button issue, not just for people, but for companies and their bottom lines too. And depending on who you ask, DEI tends to be either the answer to everything or the downfall of modern society. There doesn't seem to be much in between. Yet another something that is polarizing America.
And when we say polarizing, we mean it. Some companies are standing firm on their DEI commitments, saying it's essential for innovation and fairness. Others are pulling back, rebranding, or ditching their programs altogether. So what's really going on here? Today, we want to cut through the noise. We're talking about what DEI actually is and what it's not, why it stirs up so much drama, and we're asking why this conversation tends to hit such a nerve no matter the side you claim to be on.
Because at the heart of it, DEI isn't just about corporate policies or political talking points. It's a legal, political, social debate that is already affecting policy, funding, and even who gets hired and admitted where. Beyond that, it raises greater questions. What do fairness and opportunity really look like in practice? How do we balance individual merit with systemic inequities? And how do we create spaces, whether in school, workplace, communities, where everyone feels they can belong? These aren't easy questions, but they're ones every generation has to wrestle with. Welcome to Two Millennials and Mom.
I'm Callie.
I'm Cole.
I'm Mom.
Howdy, ladies.
Hi.
Hey, y'all. So we've been kind of having this conversation in bits and pieces just in our everyday life and wanted to have a dedicated opportunity and time and space to sit down and get it all out, right? Let's talk through all of the kind of facets of it. And I do want to preface this, and I think that both of you will agree. We are not experts on DEI. We are not sitting here advocating for one way or the other. This is just us talking about what we do know, what we don't know, what we would like to learn, how we see it, and kind of our takes on it. So I think it's just important to toss that out there right here up front. We're learning too.
Yeah, and we may toss out some concerns. That doesn't necessarily mean that there are concerns. These could be concerns from other people in society. Just to be clear, just talking about it today.
Right. So let's kind of chat about what DEI actually is. What does that mean?
Maybe it's what DEI is supposed to be.
Yeah, that's a better way to put it. I think in general, I think it would behoove us to define those terms individually. In kind of my opinion and what I am gathering from this greater conversation across, especially our country, our culture right now, diversity is talking about who's in the room.
Who's welcome in the room.
Who's welcome in the room. Who's allowed to be in the room at all. And I think that we have to kind of look at that. It's every single room. Who's in the room for leadership? Who's in the room for opinions? Who's in the room for having conversations? And so I think that diversity is supposed to be a better representation of our actual makeup rather than just a mathematical equation. Well, 13% of the population is Black, so we have to have 13 in every 100 Americans be Black. It's a opportunity to open it up for larger debate, discussion, discourse, common ground, all of these things. We're opening it up to who's allowed to be in the room. And I don't really know who gets to make the rules.
Choose.
On that. Yeah, choose.
Well, and it's interesting that especially in this country, we are a diverse group of people.
A melting pot.
A melting pot. And so it's interesting to think of, why do we even have to have this discussion? If you're already a melting pot,
shouldn't it happen naturally?
Yeah, doesn't it happen?
Yeah, and I think that that's what most advocates, or not advocates, most opponents of DEI, I think that's probably the root of their argument.
But I also think that there are people that don't have the opportunity to be part of the room. They're part of the culture, but not part of the room.
Well,
Can you give me a little bit more? What do you mean by that? Or maybe an example?
I think if you are a kid from a poverty neighborhood, that your school is not as good or is barely passing mustard,
has fewer
and
resources.
you don't have financial availabilities to you, then how do you get invited to the room? Do you even know what to wear when you are invited to the room? Because your life is so different. Your culture is so different than somebody who does have what we consider kind of innate abilities. Truth,
Opportunity.
the truth is, not everybody in America does. As much as we would like to say, we're the land of opportunity, sometimes we're not. And that comes to a question of, is that systemic? Is that deliberate?
Well, and I think that that's where you kind of lean into the equity part of it. So I think of it like almost like a boardroom in a movie scene, right? You've got this big, huge monster table of all of your top executives. It's not just the table. It's also the receptionists and secretaries and assistants who are sitting around the outside who never make a peep. So I think that we've got to do better at setting it up. Y'all are going to laugh at my analogy here. Setting it up like a talking circle rather than a boardroom, because we've got to make sure that everybody has kind of that equal opportunity to fairly participate. Not just, well, I'm in the room, but I'm not allowed to talk. You know what I mean? I think that
Yeah.
is kind of the equity part of it.
But again, I think that comes down to, if I have grown up in a certain way, the reality is I may not have any idea of how somebody else grew up and what
Mhm.
that means to them. And if I don't recognize that in myself and don't give credence to that to somebody else, I mean, and this could be as simple as growing up Baptist versus growing up Catholic, girl versus boy. It's every facet that we face in life. And sometimes we're just not aware that somebody else is different and what those differences mean.
Well, because I think that we have been trained that those differences are our fear. I think that that's where it kind of
I don't know if it's that so much, Kelly, or if
I
it's that we
I
just
think
are
it is.
unaware.
In
I think
some
that I think
cases,
that
I
there's an
think it is.
unawareness, but I think that it manifests in fear. And I think let's go back to September 12th of 2001. September 11th, we all have to come together. We're all Americans. This is great. September 12th, and it may not have been exactly that soon, but the country has decided that this is Muslims doing this. So any other Muslim, whether they had anything to do with this, because of the color of their skin, because of their background, because of their ancestry, now they're the enemy. And that was wrong.
And I don't think that was universal. I think there was a faction of people who felt that way that didn't give any credence to somebody not being involved in that just because of their ethnicity. Maybe
I
I'm wrong about that.
I think that you had a lot of people who were, I mean, you guys, there has been research done on it. There have been articles written about it. There have been books written about it by people with Muslim backgrounds and Middle Eastern descent who were like, all of a sudden, I became a target. I've been in this country my entire life. My parents were brought here when they were kids, and now I'm the enemy just
And I
because
don't disagree with that. I just don't think that was universal.
Yeah, I don't think every
Every
American
American.
thought Muslims were bad.
I don't think every American thought
Yeah.
Muslims were bad. I think that more than we
Enough.
would. Yes, enough. Enough
Enough.
is the perfect word. I
Yeah.
think enough thought it and enough took that to heart that you had people getting jumped and beaten up and persecuted for
Threatened.
nothing but threatened for nothing beyond their skin and hair color.
Yeah, I mean, and that's just ignorance, though.
Agreed. But that's how I'm saying. I think that that manifests as fear, right? I am not educated enough to know that it was not every single Muslim. So now I'm scared of them. So I have to get them before they get me. And I think that that's wrong.
I would agree.
Here's where I was going. We listened to a YouTube recently, and he was talking about coming from a Black neighborhood and his family being drug dealers. And he made the comment that there just wasn't a judgment there. That was just how life went. And so within that community, they didn't judge each other, which was a fascinating idea to me and something that I'd never ever thought of. I mean, I thought everybody grew up making judgment calls on this is good, this is bad. And he literally said that entire community did not do that to each other. And maybe that was because of the mixture that was there.
For the record, you're referring to one of the top economists in the world, Harvard economist Roland Fryer.
Yes.
I mean, I think there's probably a little bit more to it than that, because he also talks about within his community there were conservatives and there were liberals. And just because they were on different sides politically, you're talking about a relatively close, tight-knit community that even though they have disagreements, there is a perspective that it is kind of that community fending for itself. And so they don't have an opportunity, even when they disagree on things, they still have to remain a community because they need each other.
Yeah. So does that go for inclusion?
I mean,
Well,
to
Is
an
that a
extent, yeah.
mini area of inclusion for that definition?
I think to a point. I mean, again, I'm going to go back to my boardroom talking circle analogy here. I think inclusion is making sure that people feel like they belong in the room. I'm allowed to be here and I'm allowed to speak up. That's why I kind of use the talking circle part of it. It's not just the boardroom. I'm not just sitting on the outskirts of it. I'm allowed to have my own opinion, stake, perspective, and share that. And that is just as valid as the next person's.
You're not here because you're a token whatever demographic.
Right.
You're here because you are contributing to our combined effort.
Right.
And your contribution is important and to be acknowledged and heard.
Right.
And it doesn't have to do with what your race is or your orientation is or your ethnicity. It's that you're there.
Right.
That you
Because of what you bring, the skill set and ability and talents that you bring to the table, regardless of anything else.
But I think it's more than skill sets and talent. I think it is perspective. This perspective is different than mine. We talked
Valid.
about it a little bit the other day. I can read every single book, fiction, nonfiction, about being in prison. I can watch every single episode of 60 Days In, of Locked Up, of Prison Break. That doesn't mean that I understand what prison is like, that I can confidently come in and be like, "Oh, this is how prison feels." That doesn't mean that. I don't have that perspective, that lived experience. And so that's why I think that it has to be more than just what you bring to the table from a talent perspective. I think it also has to be that lived experience perspective. That
Sure.
is different. That is interesting. That is yours in your own right. And just because it's yours doesn't mean it has to be mine. But I do think it could be helpful and productive for me to hear from your perspective. I think
So
that's the
what
inclusion.
isn't it? What isn't DE?
I think that we have to be really straightforward here. I think that DEI is not lowering standards. We certainly talk about DEI policies and practices within the hiring space. It can't be okay, I have to hire 13 Black people for every 100 people that I hire, no matter what qualifications they have.
Quotas.
Quotas. Right. I do not think that it can't be that defined. Is that the right word?
Is DEI the same as wokeness, where the terminology depends on who's saying it?
In some instances, yes. But, I think that there is a quantitative aspect that needs to be acknowledged here. What is every corporation, if not a bureaucracy of some kind? And I think that oftentimes, from a bureaucratic perspective, it can be very difficult to try and quantify qualitative aspects. So it turns into, or at least has an opportunity to turn into,
Rigid,
quotas.
set, hard defined, fast rules.
Right. Because, hey, we need to make sure that we have diversity. So in order for us to have diversity, 13 out of every 100 hires needs to be Black. And I think that's probably one of the primary concerns of opponents of DEI is they're seeing it from that facet. They're seeing it from they're they're seeing the quantitative aspects of it from a bureaucratic perspective, and that has an opportunity then to potentially lead to lowered standards. So if the standard is X and we say, okay, we need 13% of our hires or people in our organization to meet I qualification, and if they don't meet X qualification, it doesn't matter because we still have to have 13. We still have to have 2. We still have to have 5 of whatever demographic it is that they are saying that they need
Represent.
to fill to be represented. And so I think that's where the biggest opponents of, and again, I don't think that that's the spirit or the intention of DEI, but I think that there are certainly situations where that's what it becomes.
The
I,
underlying thread.
I think the intention is to say, recognize that you have a bias and try to be open to
Cognizant of.
cognizant of that bias. So let's talk about hiring. You are naturally going to hire the person that you relate to the most. And so if you do that, then you are, I hate to say you're
Inherently
repeating.
biased.
Yeah, it is a bias. So then if I can go, well, let me look at this person from a different perspective. What kind of talent do they have? What do they bring to the table? And if you do it that way, it may not have anything to do with ethnicity or gender.
Well, and I think that we also have to take into account research that has been done on this topic. I'm trying to think, Mom, I'm going back to Blind Spot, that book that we read. Hiring managers tend to be white females. And that has nothing to do with anything except history, right? And you can look at all of the research that has been done, and Ashley has a better job, or Chris has a better job or a better chance of getting the job because they relate to Hillary or Nancy, because Nancy doesn't know Jamal. She doesn't have that kind of perspective relationship with Jamal, that all of a sudden that's more urban than I know or than I'm comfortable with. And so I've seen other research being done on taking names off of resumes. We're going to take that bias out, that little piece of bias out immediately so that we can kind of level the playing field a little bit more. And all of a sudden, Jamal that you threw out because or somebody else whose name was not familiar to you because you didn't know
Yeah.
how to pronounce it, because you didn't grow up in that same circle, has a better chance of getting the job because their qualifications are better. But
One
your
of
bias knocked him out immediately.
one of the big orchestras used to have open auditions, and at that time it was like 99%, and I'm throwing this out, but 99% male. And then they put the musicians behind a curtain, and it was a blind audition, and the percentages absolutely changed because who they were auditioning for didn't know if that musician was male or female or black or white or purple. And so it's
It was just the
because
music.
we just have these biases. I can remember, I think it was my dad talking to me about he had two candidates, and let's say one guy was single and one guy was a family guy. He would always go to the family guy because that
was fun.
guy
He
needed,
recognized that.
he had a family to support. So it's much more important for him to give him a job.
I mean,
How do you
I
know
can-
that?
That's fair. I can understand that sentiment, though. I can understand that way of thinking. Not to say that that way of thinking is the correct way, but I can understand it.
To a degree, I can.
Well, I mean, that's just human nature, is to say, okay, I think I should be prioritizing X because it makes sense to me. Whether it actually makes sense or not is kind of irrelevant.
Yeah, that has nothing to do with merit or talent.
Right. It is, this makes sense in my head, so this is the decision that I'm making. And I think that's a shortcoming of individual people, myself included, with those inherent biases. And, you know, I'd be really interested. Roland Fryer also did a study, if I remember the name right. It is the economics of having a recognizably Black name. And so I would be very interested to go through and read through that study. He mentioned it briefly in the interview that I listened to with him. But I think that is, honestly, I think that would probably be more beneficial than anything. Take your name off of it. Take the name off of the applications. Take the race section off of applications and say, let's go through and look at qualifications. What qualifies you for this position? And you now have that blind opportunity. You know, there's a Roland talks about his version of DEI, and Mom, you were looking at it earlier. There were 3 words that he used. It was like,
Identifying, developing, retaining,
yeah, identifying,
because he sees it as talent optimization.
developing, and retaining talent. And he goes into a little bit more detail as to what that kind of means. And I sent this video to you guys last week and said, because generally speaking, I have concerns about affirmative action or DEI quotas in general, because I work for a large corporation. I see what bureaucracy can result in, and it's not always the best outcome.
You're a white male, so you could be on the losing end of that easily.
Well, I mean, in my industry, I'm probably benefiting just because it's more common. Now,
But those numbers could fall differently depending on the stance that your company took.
very true. Dr. Fryer talks about what his version of DEI looks like. And to me, it made a lot of sense. It's one of the more compelling arguments for DEI that I have heard, because it's not about your ethnic identity, your racial identity, your gender identity. It's about what lived experience do you have? Like, did you have to work harder to get the same qualifications as someone else? So, like, for me, born and raised in suburbia without having to go through very many challenges, having a pretty
Little
adequate,
hardship.
yeah, relatively little hardship economically, at least, going to what generally would probably be considered pretty decent schools, having opportunity to get my foot in the door in several different industries, ending up where I am right now. Maybe I didn't have to work as hard as someone who has the same qualifications as me that didn't have those same opportunities. So his version of DEI is taking a look at, hey, where did you come from? What is your lived experience? Did you have to work as hard? I mean, if my qualification is I have to make 70% on whatever exam, and I make 71%, and the guy who takes the test after me makes 70%, but he had to work 4 or 5 times harder because of his lived experience. He had to fight all that much harder, even though on paper I'm 1% more qualified than him. who do you think has more drive? Who is going to be the better candidate? Who is going to accelerate who's going to use their new experience in their role and expound upon it more? Who is going to work harder, me or the guy behind me who made a 1% lower score? What's the better hire? Regardless of what his name or skin color looks like. So, and to me, that makes a lot of sense. And I think that that's probably the spirit of where DEI comes from is, hey, you have these people that, and I think that this is kind of another argument for the opposition of DEI when they talk about lowering standards from a pure quantitative aspect. If I make 71% and the guy behind me makes 70, who should get the job?
Well, I think that there's a little bit more that Roland Fryer talks about that in that kind of example. If you've got, we're going to go really stereotypical here. I know that this is stereotyping. We're going to use it just for the discussion sake of this. If you've got Noah, who is a high school student taking the SATs or taking an LSAT, who lives in his really nice fancy neighborhood and his parents drive nice cars, his dad's a doctor, his mom's a professor, and he has totally blown off school, but they have hired a tutor to help him study, and he has all of these resources at his fingertips, and he has flashcards, and his parents are sitting there quizzing him at the dinner table, and he has all of this opportunity to shove this SAT information into his head versus, again, maybe Jamal, who his mom's working 2 jobs and his dad is in prison and his brother is part of a gang. He doesn't have the same access.
Who has to go work a part-time job to help his family keep the lights on?
He can't afford to go buy $3 note cards, index cards to make his flashcards and the extra books, and he can't afford the tutor to hammer all of that knowledge in. But he is living, like I said, his brother is a drug dealer, and so math makes sense to him because it has to. It's a make or break. It's a live or die situation in those instances. And again, I know that this is 100% stereotyping, and that is not at all what I'm trying to use it as an illustrative feature of this. If you've got Noah and Jamal who then go into the SATs, let's say they score the same. They both score the exact same thing, and then they go to college at the same place. Who is going to get more out of that college experience? Who is going to leverage that lived experience? And I've had to hustle. I've been fed everything out of a silver spoon my entire life, and now I'm on my own and can do whatever I want. Who is going to take and recognize that opportunity of college and do more with it?
And I think that that's almost impossible to quantify because even then,
Sure.
it's still on a person-to-person basis.
Absolutely it is.
Well, and how do you get that into a resume?
Yeah. How do you recognize that quantitatively?
I had looked for a new job here not too long ago, and I have a lot of great experience, but I don't do a great job marketing myself. It feels arrogant to me and it feels gross, and I don't like talking about myself like that. And so I've always said, as soon as I get in the room, I can knock their socks off. But getting in the room, because I have to write it down, I have to have that kind of show that arrogance and show that, well, I'm better than everybody else, just to get their attention, to get even an opportunity to go in the room. I look like shit on paper because I don't do a good job marketing myself. But get me in the room and then I'm fine. And again, I'm a white female in America. I already have an advantage. What does that look like for somebody else who doesn't have that same inherent bias of opportunity that I have?
Yeah. And
how much harder do they have to work?
And when does that stop counting?
Yeah.
Like if we were talking about trying to take a quantitative and qualitative measure of things, what if someone who had to work much harder than me scored a 75 and I got a 90? You know, like how do you weigh that lived experience from the aspect of a corporation, from the aspect of
Perspective.
a bureaucracy, right?
Look,
How do
it's the
you
same thing as the tests that we say that we have to take in school.
I was just thinking the same thing.
What do they call 'em?
Standardized tests.
Standardized test. It's the same thing. If you're in a school district that is working towards those answers, working towards that percentage, that's what they're teaching. And they may be failing at teaching everything else, but they're teaching you how to answer these questions so that their numbers look great. Or you're in a different school and maybe they're trying to teach real stuff, thought provoking, intelligence, but they're not addressing the standardized test. Those scores look different.
Yeah. I mean, and
But which
you
one's
know,
better?
for individuals, there can be somebody who knows the material and has more real life application of the material who can score worse on a test than me just because I'm good at taking tests. They don't make me nervous. I don't get bothered by them, and I am aware of the mechanics that they utilize and can exploit that to my advantage. So my test scores may look better than someone who knows the material better than me and has a better understanding of how to apply that information just because they're not good at taking a test.
That anxiety.
Yeah.
What if I don't do a great job? What if I fail? What if this is a life or death situation? This
Yeah.
changes the trajectory of my life.
And even that in and of itself, that qualitative measure of test taking could be something that's important for an employer to consider, that we don't have a great way of measuring that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that this is not that this was really our intention to go into, but I think that that's kind of yet another um tally in the lineup of reasons that standardized testing isn't a great measure.
And I think that we as Americans have proved that over and over again for the last, I don't know, what, 40, 50 years that we've been utilizing it. I mean, it's just a
But do we
bad
do anything
metric.
about it?
Well, no, but there's lots
Because
of
we don't
things
know
that
what to
we
do.
don't, yeah, there's lots of things that
Right.
we don't do anything about.
Right.
Now, we just recently had published that American high schoolers are at the lowest educationally wise math and English that they've been in, what, 20 years? So obviously, we're not doing something right. Now, you might can tell me that that has to do with COVID, and I'll give you a little bit of credit there that
20
maybe
years?
I think it
it
started
does.
long before COVID, personally.
I think it started way.
Yeah.
I think
It
a
might be a
huge
factor.
portion of my class, yeah, I certainly think that COVID exacerbated it,
Yeah.
but I mean, I saw it when I was in school, and I was in school 10 years before COVID.
Yeah.
Because the way our schools are formed, or the curriculum is designed around these standardized tests, they don't teach you to have a love for information, a love of learning, a love of knowledge. They teach you that you have to do this to scrape by in the bare minimum so that we can keep getting our funding.
And the bare
Regurgitate the.
minimum is the standard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The bare
Which is
minimum is the standard.
not where we want to be.
Well,
But
and you miss out on critical thinking. You miss out on, for lack of a better word, diversity of thought.
and I think that that's where, again, opponents of DEI would argue it has the same result. It tries to quantify qualitative aspects, which is extremely difficult to do. And when you try and do it on paper, the results oftentimes are not going to be what you want. They're going to turn into quotas, even if that's not the original intention. The original intention of standardized tests may have been good. It may have been, hey, we want to make sure
Mhm.
that everybody can read to this level, can do math to this level, can understand history to a certain level, and then that sets the bar. And then all the school has to do to keep getting their funding is make sure that everybody's hitting that minimum threshold. So it prioritizes hitting the minimum threshold, not in saying
Exceeding it.
exceeding it. Exactly. And so, yeah, you have a couple of superstars in every category that they go and they make 99 or 100% on their standardized tests, and they look great because they're really good at absorbing and retaining that information or exploiting the mechanics of those tests.
And it
When
changes the bell curve for the benefit of those people who were a little bit lower on that scale for whatever reason.
Yeah. And so, again, I think that that would be a big argument against something like mandated diversity. We should naturally have diversity. We shouldn't have to say we have to mandate this. To me, DEI should be a philosophy, a thought process, and not a policy, because
Not a
we should
mandate.
inherently saying, hey, these people have a different experience than me. They have a different perspective than me. That in and of itself can have value. And you know what? Not every person is going to have a perspective that brings value to whatever it is that you're working on. If you have experience as a police officer, that may not be relevant if you're going and applying for farming jobs. It just may not be. But that doesn't mean that you don't have good ideas when it comes to farming. It just means that your experience as a police officer may not be relevant. But at the same time, it may be. You may be able to think about something from a policy that your department had, or a strategy that you utilized in conversations with people that could bring a lot of value to whatever role you have in the farming industry.
De-escalation tactics.
Exactly. The and a great example of that, I was a bouncer and a bartender for a decade. 10 years I spent working in bars with drunk people pretty much 5 to 6, sometimes 7 nights a week. And now I work in finance on the phone, and the people that work around me are just flabbergasted. Like, you're just so good at talking to people. Like, well, yeah, it's because I've got 10 years of experience talking to drunk people face to face and explaining things to them like they're a child, but in a way that's respectful so that they don't think I'm being rude. And so I have a great advantage from that lived experience. But who in the world would think that being a bartender and a bouncer would relate to being a stockbroker?
Right. Well, and I think that again kind of goes back and leads me back to the Roland Fryer conversation. He went and did ride-alongs with police officers in all of these different cities for some research. And he was sitting there one day. I don't even remember if he talked about specifically what the situation was, but somebody was killed, died 6 feet from him. And he was taken out, mentally, emotionally, just exhausted. And he was like, okay, guys, let's go out. Beers are on me. And they all looked at him and they were like, huh? What? And he was like, I don't like, I'm going to buy you a beer. Like, let's go relax and kind of bring it back down. And the sergeant or chief or whoever it was looked at him and goes, if we did that every time somebody was killed, I would never have a workforce. I would not have a police force.
We have to
We
go
don't
back
have
to
that
work.
luxury. We have to go back to work. This is a common experience for these people. And his takeaway, besides the research itself, but his takeaway was, holy shit, being a police officer is hard.
And
That's
he
a
didn't go
hard
into it with
career.
that,
Mentality.
Yeah.
Yeah.
but what he saw them doing and how they had to do it. And he didn't find the bias that he thought he was going to find, which cost him
Surprised
a
him.
lot.
Yeah. I think that, again, Nicole, I think you really hit the nail on the head. We can't quantify we don't have a good way of quantifying lived experience.
Yeah. And that's
And you
why
could
there
put
are
that
two
you were on
different
a
words,
bouncer.
quantitative and qualitative. And
Right.
it's so hard to quantify a qualitative trait. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to
Yeah.
turn it into a math problem. We're trying to turn it into an algorithm, and we're not really very good at it.
I think that more than that, and I think you see it a lot with corporations and bureaucracy, we're trying to make all of the gray black and white.
Yeah.
We're trying to say it's definitively this or it's definitively that. And it just isn't black or white.
Are
There
we
is
trying
so
to
much
say
gray.
that everybody starts at the same place and the truth is that they don't?
I think that it's true that we don't all start at the same place. I don't know that everybody is trying to say that that's the case. I think that we want to hope that that's the case, and we want to understand that, because then our brains, it makes more sense to us. Okay, we all started here and that is logical. Okay, fine. But that isn't reality.
Yeah. I mean, there's just inherently so much diversity in our country, economically speaking, ethnically speaking, religiously speaking, ideologically speaking, there's so much diversity inherent, but we don't, because we're all together, I don't know that we all really recognize that. And I don't think we utilize it to the degree that we could be.
And to our own advantage.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But here's my question. Do we just not want to see that there's diversity? Because here's my deep question. What's wrong with trying to give other people or races or genders an opportunity?
Nothing.
Yeah.
The
Nothing. But as soon as you say it out loud and start pointing to it, that's where the issue becomes. Because, and here's only my 2 cents. The moment that you point it out, you start saying, Callie, you need to give other people an opportunity. Then all of a sudden I get defensive and say, oh, I was. You had me all wrong. And we're overcorrecting and overcompensating because we feel like we're being nitpicked, because we feel like we're being micromanaged. I don't know if I'm explaining that well or right, but I
Let
think
me
that
ask you this
we get
question.
defensive.
We have an administration that is against DEI, and that's an undefined DEI is evil. And so that's not just getting defensive. That's making a decision early on that something is wrong. Where does that come from?
But you
Yeah.
know, I think Callie's right to a certain degree that it comes from fear. One, I
Mhm.
think it is the people behind that administration, and I'm not trying to. Well, for one, I think part of it is the people who are funding it. The voters who are behind it are against it because they see the on paper version of it. They see we're trying to turn gray into black and white, and it's turning into something that they are afraid of, something that concerns them, not the intention of it, but what they perceive as the result.
Yeah.
Which I think is
Dangerous.
well, I think that allowing it to turn into what they perceive it as is dangerous too, because it,
Agreed.
in the long run, destroys the spirit of its intention.
Yes, exactly.
And I think those people would say, I don't care if you're black, white, blue, or purple. Are you the best person for the job? But then when they go to hire, they may not be considering the factors like lived experience. And
Putting
you
that
can,
into
because you can
practice.
only get so much in an interview. I mean, if you want me to sit down and tell you about my whole lived experience, well, at this point, I have 32 years of lived experience. We're going to be here for a while.
Well, and again, like I go back to my prison analogy. You can sit here and tell me every single thing that has ever happened to you in as much detail as you want, but until I lived it, I don't have the same experience.
Well, not
When
only
I live
that,
it, I don't have the same experience.
as
We
a
grew up in
as
the same house.
yeah, as
We have
someone
different
who
experiences.
may be hiring you, I may not know how to utilize or know the importance of your lived
That
experience.
information.
Those 5
Yeah.
questions, what are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? Where do you want to be in 5 years? Aren't going to cut that.
No, they're
Yeah.
not going to get you there. So one of you brought up the current administration, and I think that we should talk, like kind of pull politics into it. Again, I think that we as a society, as a culture, are trying so hard to define it, to label it, to make it black and white so that we can legislate, regulate it.
Are we really? Do you think we're really trying, or are we going on sound bites of what this is?
I think it's both.
Yes. And I think it depends on who specifically you're talking to about when there are lots of determining factors in that. And I think it changes with every single person that you talk to. What the motivations are behind it, what the intentions are, what the goals are, why those are the goals, what it is that you're trying to get out of it.
Which side you're on?
Which side you're on, your lived experience. Hey, I have Cali company and we want to look really great in PR, so we're going to do this. I mean, having a woman-owned company or a veteran-owned company is a marketable skill, trait,
Advantage.
opportunity, advantage. And so I got to leverage everything that I can. And I think that we have created a world in which being marketable has become detrimental.
too much of a priority.
Yeah.
Because,
It's
there
salt in the
are
dish, right?
there are some industries that don't do that. I mean, this is a kind of a controversial take here, going back to Charlie Kirk, because Charlie Kirk was a big opponent of DEI, spoke out against it regularly. And one of the arguments that he used was the NBA. The NBA doesn't market that it's 75% black. They don't have to. They just provide the best product. They just have the best basketball. And if they started setting quotas, well, only 13% of our players can be black, Charlie Kirk's argument was that would be detrimental to the level of play. Because right now, what does the NBA look for? The best. They just want the best. Doesn't matter what you look like. If that means you're 7 foot tall and black, that means you're 7 foot tall and black. If it means you're 5'3" in white, you're 5'3" in white. And it just so happens that 75% of them are black. And that's irrelevant to the formula. It is put the ball in the basket and do it in an exciting manner. Do it consistently. Do it accurately. And so
When we ask you to.
yeah.
I'd be curious, though, if you're looking at that, when we're talking about that kind of it factor, lived experience factor, how much of that plays into who's on the NBA? Because if that's your way out of a neighborhood,
Yeah.
you're going to work harder for that.
Yeah.
But again, going into the stereotypes of that, you're in every single movie about a black neighborhood in any capacity. Doesn't matter what the context of the movie is, you're going to have guys on a basketball court every time, every single time. And I think that we have to recognize that there is some truth in stereotypes.
Sure, there is. That's why they're stereotypes.
Yeah.
But again, I think that we kind of as a culture have stereotypes are bad and wrong. And so we can't just live on those. And we can't. We cannot. Again, it's the salt in the dish,
Well,
right?
because
I
not
love salt.
everybody fits the stereotype.
Right. I love salt,
not
but
a
too
hard
much
and
of a good
fast
thing, too
rule.
much of a consistent thing doesn't make it better.
Can
If you
ruin the
put
dish.
too much salt in the dish, it could be ruined. It has to be a balance. It has to ebb and flow. It has to work. If I put 1 teaspoon of salt in this dish for 4 people versus 1 teaspoon of it in the same dish for 16 people, it doesn't work. It doesn't balance the same way. Too much of a good thing is not a good thing.
Yeah.
I
So
did.
I
Go ahead.
think so much of this is definition, and we lose the definition.
Well, I think
Because
it's
we're
something
trying
that's
to
really
define
hard to
it.
define.
Yeah.
Again, I think it's we're trying to quantify something that is qualitative. And
Yes.
why we're doing that is a result of the system that we have built. It's a system that runs on paper that we don't have time. We're not efficient enough to go through and say, hey, what is your whole lived experience? How can I use that lived experience to be a judge of your character, to be a judge of your ability, to be a judge of your talent? Because trying to do that, economically speaking, we're incapable of it at this point. For one, our brains can't think fast enough to decipher that. The other part is there's so much information to plug in that
process.
that like we as individuals with our
Does not compute.
with
Never
our
mind.
little monkey brains cannot. For one, Callie, I don't have the ability to download your lived experience and then try and use that. Even if I could download your lived experience, the amount of time it would take me to process your lived experience and try and put it through some sort of formula to say, is she going to be the best person for this job? We're just not capable of that. It's not something that's feasible, even if it's something that is important and we should strive for.
Right. And I go back to black and white. It's like, Mom, you said, is it just definitions? The definition makes it black or white, and we can't define it that way. We can't say, oh, it's black and it's white. There's too much gray. It changes from one person to the next, from one company to the next, from one situation to the next, from one sex or gender to the next, one race, ethnicity to the next. It's all varied. It's all over the place. I think the problem with diversity is supposed to happen naturally is our brains do not function that way. Our brains cannot process, compute all of this information.
Well, I mean, you have to do it with intentionality. You
Yeah,
have to,
I think that that's true, but I don't think that that's the only problem.
sure.
I think that our intentions are going to be different. Cole, you said on a podcast ages and ages ago, just because mom and I are sitting here saying, oh, we want everything to be good. We would be good employers. We would be nice to our employees. We don't need much. That gives you an opportunity, a foothold to go in and exploit that based on nothing but opportunity and intentions. They're good. I'm going to take this into a different direction for my benefit.
100%.
It's the same thing.
Yeah, no, I completely agree.
We cannot, it's like Cole says, you cannot legislate morality. We cannot define diversity. And diversity is probably not the right word there.
Well, I mean, you cannot put a quota on diversity. You can't say,
Yes.
if I have X amount of people from X background, then I have achieved the diversity that I need to be successful. Because Monday, that might be right. But the problem that you're facing on Tuesday, that may not be enough, or it may be more than you need. And so you're trying to find that kind of happy medium. And and like exactly like you said, Callie, when you try and define it, when you try and turn that gray into black and white, again, it loses the spirit, it loses the intentionality of the idea.
Yes.
So don't you think this started with the idea of recognizing that some people didn't have the opportunity, and let's give them? I mean, if we go back, I mean, part of this started civil rights, so that you had a group of people racially who couldn't get a job or weren't allowed to even apply for a job and came from, a different background. And so the idea here was to be able to mandate that they be given an opportunity. And we've pushed it so far past that and made it a bigger, uglier thing by using quotas. And maybe quotas were, maybe at the time, they were the best solution. I don't know that I don't believe that they are now.
Well,
But there is an element there that says everybody's not been given an equal opportunity, so let's do something to level the playing field.
Because we want to define it, because we want to make it black and white. So in order to level the playing field, we have to bring these people up, but there's only so much room we can go. So we have to push these people down. And it just ends up being this topsy-turvy, chaotic mess because we want to define it and it is not definable.
yeah. I mean,
Do you guys,
I completely agree.
do you guys remember that movie here from several years ago? It was Taraji P. Henson. I think it was called The Best of Enemies. And it was set in North Carolina, I think, back in 1960s, 70s. It was a KKK leader of his local chapter. And he ended up having to co-chair some committee in their town in North Carolina with a black woman. And oil and water.
Yeah,
And
hated each
they
other.
hated each other. And through the process of them working together and getting to know each other and not meshing well, they became lifelong great friends because they took an opportunity that they didn't want to. Neither of them wanted to. It was forced and thrust upon them. You have to do this. And I can't remember the reason why, but they had this really fierce rivalry that they ended up with an opportunity to better understand the other one, both of them. And so they were able to give their perspective and share their perspective, but they ended up becoming this unlikely great friends, and it changed their lives. And so I think that that's the opportunity that we have to give. I have to give anybody out there because they are different than me, whether they are a 6-foot-tall redhead woman who was raised in America or a 7-foot-tall NBA player raised in the Bronx. We have to give everyone an opportunity to share their perspective and see what it is that we can where we can relate, where we can find commonalities, and where we can discuss our differences.
Mhm.
That in my mind is DEI.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is kind of a random tangent here. We
I
talked
just talked about
earlier.
movies, like go for it, man.
We talked about like blind applications where you don't have your name and you don't have your ethnicity. What happens when you go through and you select the best candidates that way? Let's say they do have some form to provide your lived experience to show, hey, I had to work harder for this. What happens when all of those who qualify, all of those who are accepted are white men? What happens when all of them are Asian women? Does that mean that that role is too precisely defined? Does that mean that there are certain qualities within a certain group of people that make them better for that certain job? I mean, just because
Good.
statistically speaking, if you're talking about a small enough sample size, it's certainly possible that if you were to approach it that way, that all of your applicants could have a similar situation or be part of a similar demographic. They have different lived experiences. Is that not DEI? Is that bad?
Think that when it is rooted in opportunity, I think it's excellent. But I think that in order for it to be rooted in opportunity, it cannot be rooted in fear. So if you want to sit here and talk about this group of people all happens to be wonderful and productive and helpful to society, to this business, and they all happen to be Asian women, I cannot let fear rule me. Oh, well, that means that they're better than me. That means that maybe they are, Callie. Maybe they are better for you. Maybe
And
they're a
maybe they're
better
just
fit for
better
you
at one thing.
at this. And we can't allow that to make us defensive. If we take the positivity away from that and leverage it to everyone's benefit, everyone wins. But when we become defensive, everyone loses.
You know,
So all of those Asian women have to defend themselves and get defensive. And I have to defend my perspective and say, oh, well, this is what I know and this is what I bring to the table. When we use it as a jumping off point and take the fear out of it, everybody wins.
but how do you take the fear out of it for everyone else who applied to that position that didn't get it?
I think that if we were doing a really good job, we as a society, as a hiring person would come back and say, hey, this didn't work out for you in this instance. Let's go and find something that you're going to be excellent at.
But you can't, if I'm applying to a
I know.
company, I cannot expect their HR who didn't select me to help me find another job.
I know. But I think that what if like I said, I went through this job search thing and it was so incredibly irritating to me when you would apply for a job and then radio silence, absolute crickets. But then somebody would come back and say, hey, we didn't choose you for this, this, and this reason. Then I can take that information and leverage it for the next place. Whether that is, oh, I need to go and learn more and educate myself on this, or I need to change my expectations for the type of job that I'm applying to, or the type of company that I'm applying to. When you have and utilize that constructive criticism, because that's what it is, right? When you utilize that constructive criticism to build you up, to encourage you, to allow you to become better, everybody wins.
Right, but that requires them to provide constructive criticism, and I would expect most of them probably aren't going to do that. They're not going to spend the time to give you that feedback. They're going to say, sorry, we've given the position to someone else. Have a nice day.
I totally agree with you. You are 100% correct. I am little Miss Optimist over here. What if that wasn't the norm?
But how can you expect someone to do that for you for free? We live in a transactional economy. How can you expect someone to spend that time on you when they're not receiving any benefit for it? I mean,
Because
I
I
get
think
what you're saying, but that's
I know.
not the reality that we live in.
I know. And you're right. It is not at all the reality that we live in. But I am going to continue to be optimistic because it is who I am in my heart. What if it were different? So, yes, absolutely. It would require time from this corporation who gets nothing out of it right now. But what if we looked at what if everybody sucked it up and invested the time, because I'm investing in my community, and gave that time to somebody who I am not immediately benefiting from and said, hey, you're not going to be a great marketer, but you might be an excellent person in finance. Let me connect you with this friend of mine. Then all of a sudden, 5 years down the road, when Callie goes into finance and she's awesome at it, and I pointed her in the right direction, I go into my local bank and say, hey, I need to do this. I don't know how to do it because I'm a marketer. Callie can step in and say, oh, I got you.
I
Like, what if like the domino effect of that? I know it's impossible. I know, I get it. Fine. Leave me alone. Let me live in my little happiness bubble
No,
for a
despite
second.
your optimism, there's a liability there that people are just not going to take.
Yeah, a
But what if
corporation
they
is
did?
legally required to not do that. I mean, they are disincentivized because if they didn't hire you, the only place that will is their competition, because they are in competition with every other corporation for everyone else's time, attention, and money.
But what if they did?
I mean, it's a great little fantasy, Cal, but
And I know you're right.
ain't
That's
gonna
the word
happen.
for it. But what if it was like, and what if we all got to say, this is better. Let's shoot for that. You know, it's like that old adage, shoot for the moon. Cause even if you miss, you still land among the stars. It'd be a great place to be, y'all.
It would.
What if we all got to live in there, in that,
And
in
if
that world?
everybody could be nice.
I know it's not reality, but I like to think about it.
I mean,
I want that goodness,
I know you do.
and I want that goodness for everybody.
Yeah. And that's the nice thing about you. You're not restricting it to a certain class. You want it for everybody. And
'Cause
I
I
love
just
that
see
about
such
you.
benefit for everybody. Everybody gets to win. And I know, again, I know that that's not reality, but I would love for it to be.
Not
Yeah,
everybody gets to win.
that's a hard one. So
So where do we go?
Yeah.
we've talked about this a lot in our conversation, kind of briefly trying to quantify that qualitative metric. What would an application process look like if Indeed had a grit score? If there was a way to include a measurement of what my lived experience equates to, so that I could market that to an employer to say, hey, I had to work, because everybody's going to say, I had to work really hard to get where I am. But it's my working really hard and Callie's working really hard may not be the same thing.
You know, we have a potential, I think, with AI to come up with something to this effect. You know, recognize our voice and recognize our background, although AI sometimes gets it wrong.
We all do.
There's a potential there. And it's a really interesting thought of, like you say, Cole, a grit score. How
Yeah.
much do you want this? How hard did you work to get here?
How hard are you willing to work to make it happen?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that the more that I sit here and think about it, Mom, your idea of applying AI to it is fantastic, because it can consume all of that information and try and parse it and at least spit out something that is probably better than trying to have a 15-hour conversation with an HR
Yeah.
representative or with a hiring manager to say, these are all of the hardships that I've gone through and faced in my life. But, I also see some potential downsides to that, just like with any other system that we try and create that comes with the ability to exploit it. Somebody can spin some fanciful tale.
Oh.
How do we take the input for this grit score calculator and verify it?
Yeah. Well, and I was just thinking, I think we have lost something in that most of our jobs are going through LinkedIn and those AI bots identifying, shooting this one that direction and that resume that way. And we've lost something in being able to personally identify somebody. And I'm sure, because I used to read resumes and hire based on my gut reaction to that resume. So I know I didn't always make every decision correctly, but I think AI has taken so much of that personality and individuality out that I even hesitate to say AI could do a grit score, because maybe you can't. Maybe
Yeah, how do we take something subjective and make it objective?
Yeah.
So I think you guys need to read that book. It's called Grit by Angela Duckworth. And I've talked about it on this podcast before. She found ways to calculate grit. And she has done a ton of research on this. At one point, she was like a FBI negotiator. She has all of these weird kind of strange skill sets in the grand scheme of things. And she was able to turn that into a grit score, what that means, how to recognize it. And my favorite story from the book is she's talking about the military academy at West Point. And they have what they call like one of their introduction classes for people at West Point is really tough. They call it the Beast. And I can't remember how long it is, and I can't remember all the things that they do, but they have what they apply, what West Point applies. It's kind of like that standardized testing thing, what they call the whole candidate score. Okay, we're going to predict that these couple of people are going to make it because they are the best candidates. And then they started looking at how predictable that whole candidate score was for people who were making it through the Beast. And it sucked. And it was better than nothing, for sure.
Yeah.
But she then was able to come in and apply the same kind of logic to, I guess it's not the same kind of logic. She was able to apply the logic
A
of
different
grit
logic.
to these same candidates going through these same course. And the whole candidate score was not at all predictable, but her grit score could nail it every single time. Like
So why aren't we
every
using
time.
that?
You know, in some
Because we
in
have to
some
change, and we're not very good at that.
in some places we kind of are. If you go through and you listen to the stories of Navy SEALs from buds, if you go through and you talk to tenured, experienced Navy SEALs, especially guys who left the teams and went back to buds as instructors, they will all tell you the D1 athletes are not the ones who are the most successful. It's not the biggest, strongest, fastest guys. In fact, oftentimes it's the smallest, scrawniest guys, because it's not what is here that gives them the ability to push through. It is not their physical endurance, their physical strength, or their speed. It is their mental toughness that allows them to get through that experience. Even though they aren't as strong, they aren't as fast, they don't have the same endurance as those other guys, they have the mental fortitude to work and push through that experience. And they're the ones who come out on the other side the most successful. They're the ones who are grabbing that D1 athlete and dragging him across the beach to get him to the finish line so that they now have this beast of a guy on their team that they can work with and utilize and motivate and encourage and say, hey, this is how I got through this. This is the mental tough. This is what these are the tricks I use. And so I think that's really interesting to that specific group of people, one of the most exclusive brotherhoods, one of the most elite group of people in the entire world, that's specifically what their instructors are trained to look for, is that grit. That's the whole purpose of their pipeline, is to weed out everyone who doesn't have it.
You guys have just said something that I think is fascinating. You can identify this.
Mhm.
So you have to put people in place in all of those places, whether that's the university or the job or school. You need to have people in place who can identify that.
But then you have to give everyone an opportunity to run the course, because you can't identify it in someone who doesn't go through the program.
Yeah, that was her thing.
So y'all, is that what DEI is supposed to be?
Yeah.
Running the course?
Letting everyone
The
run the
opportunity.
course.
It's the definition.
Stop. Don't do that. We
Right.
don't
But
have to
again,
define it.
but as a corporation, you do. If you want
I
to
know.
apply
Actually,
something like that, you do. And you can't let everyone run the course. You have to go through and look for the people who, according to the metrics that you have in place, you think may be able to make it to the finish line.
But your metrics suck.
I think,
Not
Callie,
yours, Cole, but
Yeah.
I think I'm actually saying it differently, Callie. You're hearing that I'm defining it. I'm just saying we've defined it wrong.
yes.
We're using the wrong definition.
Yeah, she literally talks about in that book, she says, for me, the question became, how do you measure something so intangible, something that decades of military psychologists hadn't been able to quantify, something those very successful people that I'd interviewed said that they could recognize on sight, but couldn't think of how to directly test for. I sat down, looked over my interview notes, and I started writing questions that captured, sometimes verbatim, descriptions of what it means to have grit. Half of the questions were about perseverance. They asked how much you agree with statements like, I have overcome setbacks to conquer an important challenge, and I finish whatever I begin. The other half of the questions were about passion. They asked whether your interests change from year to year and the extent to which you have been obsessed with a certain idea or project for a short period of time, but later lost interest in. What emerged was the grit scale, a test that when taken honestly, which we kind of suck at, but when taken honestly, measures the extent to which you approach your life with grit.
Yeah. But going right back to what you talked about earlier, Callie, when you were applying for all of these jobs, how many people are lying on their resumes and overselling themselves? And how many
Agreed.
people are like you, where they may be underselling themselves on their resumes
Agreed.
because they want to be humble? And so,
Because we suck. We all human
yeah,
beings suck.
I don't even want to say that
Not
we
all of
suck.
them.
I just want to say that we're all so wildly different. We can't see things the same way, and we struggle so much to see it someone else's way, even when that other perspective brings so much value.
Because I think that the goal is wrong. The goal is not to be able to see it the same way. The goal is to be able to understand that people see things differently.
Right, but that is
Yeah.
not inherent to human nature. Our
I
nature
know.
is to literally fend off the universe around us from killing us, and the only way to do that is to fight through everything the only way we know how from our own perspective. Even if
Because
that
we
means
suck.
even if that means ignoring a different perspective, that may not be the best way to go about it, but that may be how your body knows how to do it. Just like
You're
for
not
me,
wrong. You're 100% right. I just hate it. We could all do better. We could all win more if we change the way that we think,
but
if we
Here's
change the
here's the other
opportunity in
thing,
which
though.
we give.
but you're talking about a biological evolution at this point,
Freaking optimist, man.
and we can't
But
just
here's the
force
thing.
that.
Here's the thing. There's still people who are going to lose.
There always will be.
Yeah.
And if DEI is supposed to incorporate everyone, it's a failure. What we want DEI to be is an openness that we have biases and a willingness to look at somebody else and innovation and grit. Those are what we want, not quotas.
Not SAT scores,
Yeah, not
not
standardized
standardized
tests.
tests. Yes.
Again, I'm beating this horse to death. I get it. We are trying to say that we have to find a way to plug qualitative measures into a quantitative equation, and that is
But it
just
can be
not how
done.
that works.
No, I think it can be done. You look at her and she defined grit, and that's part of it. And even Roland said he could go into these neighborhoods and identify kids who had who
Yeah.
had it. And so if you can,
Right, but
if
he
there are
says
people
they
out
have it,
there,
but can he define what it is?
But I think
he
that
probably
that
can.
goes back to, and I can't tell you who said it. Don't laugh at me. But what is it? Necessity is the mother of invention.
Innovation. Yeah.
We have a need. We just
Yeah.
have to allow it to drive us forward. We have to be willing to open our minds to something new. We need this.
And if you do that, what could this country be?
Yes. And I know that's my optimism speaking for me, but yes.
You know, you're
I don't think
talking
that's
about
my
capitalism,
optimism.
right?
I mean, maybe.
I mean, no, really, the best product is the product that wins. That's the
Yeah.
idea behind it. And in this case, as employees, we are the products that we're referring to, or our work is the product that we're referring to. And so we are just talking about the basic principles of baseline capitalism.
But I think that the bottom line of that is that capitalism can only be successful so far. I am not saying capitalism is bad, but we have to be open to more than that, or we are the experiment that is capitalism coming to failure, pushing to the point of failure. And that's where we are.
Yeah, you have to have a true, and
We
here's the
can't
thing, it's so
stop.
hard to balance something like I've talked about in the past, not heavily regulated, but carefully regulated capitalism, because we are set up in a system right now where corporations are incentivized. It is more efficient for them to go and target and destroy a different product that is superior to theirs so that they can maintain their own market share than it is for them to make a better product. And that is
Yes,
the loop that we're stuck in right now.
exactly. Yes, yes, yes. And the downfall of capitalism. That's it.
100%. You have slower innovation because you have inferior products targeting superior products that may have less capital.
That are backed by more money.
Yes. And that is the problem with the form of capitalism that we currently have, is that it
Agreed.
enables, and that's a really, really slippery slope to try and regulate something like that. So again, not
Yes.
heavily regulated, but carefully regulated to say, hey, give everyone an opportunity. You cannot say they don't get an opportunity because of X, Y, or Z. You have to say, do they have a superior product? And if so, naturally, those products will rise to the top.
Yes.
But then those people that rise to the top, those products that rise to the top, cannot use their newfound influence to go and prevent other products
To
from
stay at the
outpacing
top.
them. Yes.
Yes.
And that is the problem, because legally speaking, corporations have a requirement to
Right.
do so because it is
To
in the
be the
best interest
best.
of their shareholders.
And their bottom line.
Yes.
Yes.
And so you're talking about two concepts that are inherently contradictory to each other.
I'm still dreaming over here. Because I do. I want better. I want more. I want good. For everybody.
I get that.
Give me some good news, Mom.
Oh, I love this story. There is a 97-year-old man in Buenos Aires, Alberta Chaub, who was lonesome. So he sent out an email or a video. His granddaughter helped him do this and sent out a video asking people over the age of 90 to respond to him, sharing life experiences. He just thought, we've got some mutual going. And from that, these 90-plus-year-old folks started a podcast called 90 and Counting. And if you watch the video, they are having a blast.
Oh, yeah.
They're talking about everything. He got this huge response from all over the world, people talking, people sharing, talking about love, sex, the tango, healthy habits, how roles have changed over the course of time. And he said, I'm still learning at 97. I still have so much to learn.
Good for him.
Isn't that so cool?
That's when you
That's just,
die, is when you stop learning.
Yes.
it's just so much fun to and I mean, it's a table of geriatrics sitting around talking about everything that they want to talk about, and they're laughing and they're having fun. And they have over 300,000 followers on Instagram.
Yeah.
I mean, y'all,
I bet that's a total
we
blast.
tend to write old people off in so many ways, and he's not lonesome anymore.
Good for you, Alberto. That's awesome.
Isn't it fun?
He considers them, these 90-plus-year-old folks, the generation that have lived it all.
And they have. Look at what has happened in the last, I cannot imagine my grandmother at 94 starting a podcast or participating in it, or even listening to a podcast.
She
But
would have been
also,
fascinating to have conversations with, though.
what a fantastic perspective to hear from.
What you could learn.
Yeah.
What you could learn from that perspective. But it goes back to what we've been talking about. You have to open your mind to that.
Public discourse.
Recognize that bias and say, I'm going to listen to this guy and see what he has to say. And maybe not everything he says is
You agree
valid
with, yeah.
or relates to your life, but
Sure,
what
but
if he's got the kernel of truth that
Even if it's just
highlights
a
your
little
life.
tiny piece. So,
Even a
because
little tiny
when
piece.
we take history classes in school, we just get this big overarching canvas of kind of what happened during that time frame. But
Yeah.
when you start to take individual lived experiences from people with different perspectives going through that time, there's so much more context that can nuance to be provided.
Oh, hush.
That I bet that's absolutely fascinating to listen to.
Yeah. Well, it's in Spanish, so we need our new earbuds that will translate automatically for us. But yeah,
Isn't
how
that
much
cool?
fun.
How cool.
Yeah,
So
I
they've
love it.
completed all of season 1 and they're working on season 2 now. So maybe by the time season 2 starts coming out, we can find a good way to translate and listen. It would be so much fun. Yeah.
Sounds like fun.
I'm going to take just 1 second to sit here and kind of toot our own horn. I'm not great at marketing myself, but I think that again, that was part of the driving factor of the 3 of us starting this podcast, to have different generational takes, to spark that conversation for us to sit here and say, "Hey, I don't know exactly what your lived experience is, but will you share it with me?" And I just think that no matter the situation in which you're participating in, a willingness to participate in that public discourse is valuable. And I just don't think that we can write that off. And I think that we need to do a better job as a society of taking stock in that, in situations and things like that. Again, going back to Charlie Kirk, you don't have to agree with everything that he said, but his willingness to do it, his willingness to be uncomfortable and to be vulnerable and to listen to other
Engage.
people, to engage, there is such inherent value in that.
Yeah. And
Keep
just how
talking.
fascinating it is for Callie. You and I have spent almost 20 years growing up in the same house with the same parents, and our perspectives are so wildly different with, I mean, relatively similar lived experiences.
The parameters were similar. Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
so dumbfounded as a mom how different your children can be. Like you say, living in the house, growing up with the same parents, living in the same house, having the same rules. And sometimes you just
But
think,
we're so different. Biologically speaking, you and I have what, a chromosome different? Like
Mhm.
we are both biologically clones of mom and dad. So our genes are relatively similar, less an X or a Y chromosome. And
And
we
it
we
still
have
manifests differently.
yeah, we went to the same church for so long. We lived in the same house for so long. We drove the same car at one point.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true.
And how wildly different we are.
And we could sit here and allow that to separate us and say, "Ah, we're totally different, nothing in common.
And
It's fine."
sometimes we run into that wall.
We do.
But when we allow those differences in perspective,
To keep
not even
showing
to
up.
agree with them, but just to hear them out,
To keep showing up.
listening.
to
Yep.
keep coming to the table, even when you're not always listening. When I'm not always listening, we still come back and we try and we try and we try.
Yep. The value of vulnerability.
Yeah.
I love you guys.
I love you too.